There it is. All right, thanks for being with us. It's one of those kind of days. So just a quick note, we are changing next week's schedule, so you will get a new agenda. We will not meet on Monday. So what we'll do is the bills we're hearing today, we'll work on Tuesday, and then we'll have Co-op 101 after that. So just make a note of that. It didn't dawn on me that folks may not have other meetings on Monday, and so if you want to come in, but we will not meet next week on Monday and or Friday is our plan right now, okay? But watch your emails. Okay, today our order of business is 2 hearings on House Bill 2244 and Senate Bill 27. So we will open the hearing on House Bill 2244, establishing requirements for the effective disposal of industrial hemp and requiring industrial hemp processors to register with the state fire marshal. So for a bill brief overview, Kyle Hamilton from the Revisor's Office. Welcome to committee, Kyle.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 2244 would establish certain requirements for the effective disposal of industrial hemp and would statutorily transfer the KDA's authority to register hemp processors to the state fire marshal. Under Section 1A and B, the Kansas Department of Agriculture would be required to develop a plan for effective disposal of industrial hemp in coordination with state and local law enforcement. Whenever anyone licensed under the Commercial Industrial Hemp Act is required to dispose of industrial hemp, the department would be required to notify state and local law enforcement in the jurisdiction in which the industrial hemp was grown. Section 1C would authorize the department to perform any action necessary to ensure that effective disposal of industrial hemp occurs, including taking temporary possession of the industrial hemp, destroying the industrial hemp, or supervising and directing the appropriate method of effective disposal. State or local law enforcement would be required to approve and advance any action taken to conduct effective disposal of industrial hemp. Section 1D would allow the Secretary of Agriculture to require any employee or agent of the department who participates in the effective disposal of industrial hemp to be fingerprinted and submit to a state and national criminal history record check. Under Section 1E of the bill, the department and state or local law enforcement may seek reimbursement from individuals licensed under the Act for costs incurred in conducting effective disposal of hemp. Section 1F states that the department has no authority to conduct effective disposal of industrial hemp or cannabis plants produced by those individuals who are not licensed under the Commercial Industrial Hemp Act. Section 2 of the bill would give the state fire marshal the authority to issue stop sale, use, or removal orders when the state fire marshal reasonably believes that hemp products are being produced, sold, or distributed in violation of the Commercial Industrial Hemp Act. Such orders would be valid for up to 7 calendar days. Section 3 of the bill would add a short qualifier to allow the state fire marshal to deposit hemp processor registration fees into the fire marshal fee fund. And then just a little bit of background about Section 4. In 2020's Senate Bill 66, a budget bill, language was added to Section 106 that appropriated money to the state fire marshal to enter into a memorandum of understanding with the KDA for the state fire marshal to assume the authority regarding the regulation of hemp processors during fiscal year 2021. Provisos within the language required the state fire marshal to adopt related rules and regulations, require fingerprinting and criminal history record checks, collect registration fees up to the amount of $1,000, and require that all such fees be credited to the fire marshal fee fund. So many of the amendments in Section 4 would put these same requirements into statute. They already have lawful authority through last year's budget bill, but they're just not in statute. And this means that the state fire marshal's new authority over industrial hemp processors will only last until the end of the fiscal year. The state fire marshal has adopted temporary regulations to fulfill its current requirements under that budget bill. But now to get to the actual provisions of Section 4, that section would amend the current law covering Kansas hemp processors to transfer oversight authority from the Kansas Department of Agriculture to the state fire marshal. Under subsection C of Section 4, registrations would expire annually on June 30th instead of in April, and the registration fee limit would be moved up to $1,000. Subsection H would revise the fingerprinting and criminal history record check requirements for hemp processors. Processors seeking to engage in the extraction of cannabinoids from industrial hemp, including disposal, will be required to be fingerprinted and submit to a criminal history record check. The state fire marshal could require employees of processors to go through that same process. Subsection I would require the state fire marshal to adopt rules and regulations, including for the collection and disposal of any cannabinoid extracted during the processing of industrial hemp that can't be lawfully sold in the state. The subsection would also allow the state fire marshal to grant an exemption from the application of specific requirements of such rules and regulations. Subsection J would require the KDA and the state fire marshal to coordinate with one another as necessary for the enforcement of the laws or rules and regulations relating to industrial hemp. House Bill 2244 would become effective upon publication in the Kansas Register. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Kyle? Representative Mosier.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Kyle, in 4C, why the jump from 200 to 1,000 for that registration fee?
I'll defer that question to our conferees coming up to ask why that might have been necessary.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Other questions? Representative Hsu.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Kyle. Sorry if this is too big of a question. If marijuana is legalized at the federal level, what does that do to the disposal provisions in this bill?
Well, at the federal level, it's this type of commercial program that can be legal if it's done in accordance with the provisions of the Farm Bill and with our state laws. And so under the state laws that we passed a few years ago, certain provisions were put in place to ensure that that hemp that is above a certain THC threshold are disposed of in a way that they can't be used after that disposal to somehow accumulate the THC. So even though in a certain limited way, the federal government has legalized industrial hemp, that process is still put in place to ensure that THC cannot be accumulated and it's effectively disposed.
All right, other questions for Kyle? Seeing none, thank you. Fiscal note, anyone on to talk about the fiscal note? I can't see who's all. If not, it is in your file of information for today. It looks like that, according to the State Fire Marshal, the enactment of the bill would result in revenues to the State Fire Marshal of about $12,000 based on 12 processors at a registration fee of $1,000. And it would have no fiscal effect on the agency expenditure revenue, and it's not reflected in the governor's 2022 budget. Okay, so with that, let's go to conferees, and first up, the proponents. And first up, we will have Robert Jacobs, the executive officer at the KBI. So Officer Jacobs, thanks for joining us today. Welcome to committee.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me okay?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Robert Jacobs. I am the Executive Officer for the Kansas Bureau of Investigation. Thank you for the opportunity today to present testimony in support of House Bill 2244. The KBI appreciates the efforts of both the Kansas Department of Agriculture and the state fire marshals in their efforts to research and create this House bill. As a result of the successful passage of the Commercial Industrial Hemp Act in 2019, it became apparent that the Department of Agriculture needed a process for disposing of hemp that would contain levels of tetrahydrocannabinol, hope I got that right, THC, higher than the legally allowed limit of 0.3%. Any product containing THC in excess of 0.3% would be considered a controlled substance and would be regulated under the Controlled Substance Act. The Department of Agriculture does not have law enforcement authority to dispose of controlled substances. House Bill 2244 will create a mechanism for the Department of Agriculture to work with local law enforcement agencies to dispose of hemp that exceeds that 0.3% THC level. The KBI supports Department of Agriculture and their plan to work collaboratively with local law enforcement agencies. This cooperative effort will help reduce additional strains on law enforcement resources. Inclusive in this plan are state and national criminal history checks for each Department of Agriculture employee who would also participate in the assistance with disposal of non-compliant hemp. Although hemp producers are already, required to submit fingerprints for state and national fingerprint checks or history checks, House Bill 2244 will require those same national and state level criminal history checks be done on hemp processors as well. We hope that these measures will help to reduce the risk of theft of hemp and hemp byproducts, which potentially could contain high levels of THC. The KBI supports the State Fire Marshal's Office in their efforts to regulate and provide oversight of the hemp processing industry. We appreciate that the Fire Marshal's Office has created rules and regulations which will provide for the safe and secure processing of hemp in Kansas. The KBI encourages the committee to consider passage of House Bill 2244. Thank you for your consideration of this testimony, and I would be happy to stand for questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you, Agent Jacobs. Any questions from the committee? All right, seeing none, if you can hang on the line just in case if we do come up at the end of the proponents. Thank you. Up next, Kenneth Titus, the Chief Counsel for the Kansas Department of Agriculture. Good afternoon, Mr. Titus. Welcome to committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Kenny Titus, Chief Counsel for the Kansas Department of Agriculture, and we're here in support of House Bill 2244 today. As the reviser gave a very good rundown of this bill, so I won't go through everything, but in general, there were two things that we needed to accomplish or are attempting to accomplish with this bill. The one is to create this alternative disposal method when it's needed, and the second is to permanently shift the regulation of hemp processors to the State Fire Marshal's Office. The disposal piece of this has a little bit of a complicated history, but that's sort of tied in with how the United States Department of Agriculture has rolled out their hemp program. So after we passed the 2018 Farm Bill passed, says you can grow hemp commercially. Then this legislature did likewise in the 2019 session. We then, as a department, had to wait for the USDA to issue a rule telling us how the feds expected that program to be implemented because our program has to be approved by them. We went through that process. It took them about another year to get regulations out. They released what they called the interim final rule, and then they wanted to try it out, take comments on it. That rule ended up being much stricter than we thought it would be and that many states wanted it to be. And one of the provisions in that rule initially was if you have an out-of-compliance hemp crop, you have to follow the Controlled Substance Act and the Drug Enforcement Administration's or agencies' rules when you get rid of this out-of-compliance crop. What they found out on all the public comments they received, this is highly impractical in almost every state. There's a process that involves something called reverse distributors. That's not widely available or practical anywhere. So that meant law enforcement was really the only authority that could destroy hemp. They ultimately, within about a month of that rule coming out, decided, well, we're not going to enforce that. We're going to allow what I call standard farm practices, disking a crop under, burning it, mowing it, things like that for an out-of-compliance crop. So that's been in place for the last year. Just several weeks ago on January 15th, they released their final rule, which if it's not changed, it will take effect on March 22nd. It's currently being reviewed by the new administration, but it has not been reopened for comments or pulled back. So we have no indication it won't go into effect, but it could change. We don't know for sure. In that rule, they have formally adopted these standard farm practices into the rule, saying they're allowed, and we can incorporate that. But they also left in the language, if you don't use these standard farm practices, then it has to be a law enforcement agent that destroys any out-of-compliant hemp. So while we don't anticipate needing this much, we think, one, because USDA or this administration could change the federal rule, we'd like to have this on the books as a fail-safe, and because they left that language in as an alternative method, we think this is a good method. It lays out cooperation between the state and KDA and local agencies, and we think it serves the public well to have this on the books. To Representative Shu's question, I would say we specifically wrote in the first paragraph that we only have to use this procedure. Obviously, we could use it, but it's only required when we have to follow the Controlled Substances Act and DEA regulations. So again, we think in the vast majority of instances we won't need to use this procedure, but we've written our law such that we can use more flexible methods to help producers get rid of out-of-compliant crops. But when the feds say you have to do it strictly, that's when this procedure would kick in. As far as the second piece of this shifting processors, that was a long-running conversation when the Commercial Hemp Act was originally passed. There were a number of law enforcement groups that had some concerns about concentrated THC products and extracts and things of that nature. KDA never felt like they were in a position to regulate in detail the solvents and the pressurized systems and the actual processing mechanics. We also, as you just heard, don't have law enforcement authority, so tracking concentrated extracts and things like that, where the only penalty are criminal penalties, we didn't feel like we could offer that level of regulation. We did agree to maintain a registry and some paperwork requirements, but that was essentially just to provide references for law enforcement to enforce some of these laws. We had conversations with the Attorney General's office, with the KBI, the Sheriff's Association, and others, and when they approached us, they said the State Fire Marshal would be a good fit for this. There are already fire codes in place that deal with cannabis processing systems, so that translates relatively easily. Their inspectors are also law enforcement agents, so when it comes to enforcing some of these criminal laws regarding hemp products, they're much better positioned to deal with those issues. So that was where we agreed to transfer the regulation of processors, so something more meaningful could be done as far as keeping track of that. And I'll let the State Fire Marshal speak for himself, but Representative Mosher, to the fee increase, we had started that as a $200 fee because we weren't doing very much, and we don't like we like to think if we're charging you a fee as a producer, we're providing some sort of service. We didn't feel like we were providing a very high level of service, so we set the fee at the minimum we needed to maintain a registry and check paperwork. The fire marshal, as he'll explain, will be doing much more comprehensive inspections and enforcement. So that would be why the fee increase was respected. So I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Titus. Any questions? Representative Fairchild?
I guess this might be more of a comment than a question, but, you know, I represent a rural district and have talked to farmers about industrial hemp, and, you know, the main reason why a lot of farmers say they're not interested in farming is because the regulations are just out of control. There's just way too many regulations on industrial hemp in our state, and that's just what a lot of farmers say. Just way too many fees and way too many hoops to jump through and to me, it just seems like, you know, everything that's been said so far, it just seems like we're just adding more and more regulations onto what we already have, you know, more fees, more fingerprinting requirements. And so I have a lot of concerns about this bill. I just wanted to be on the record as saying that.
Other questions or comments? What happens when you do, in a sense, have a hot batch and you go in and take the flowers off? How is that disposed of?
So the rules require it has to be made unusable or unrecognizable. So mostly it's in current practice, most people choose to either mow up the crop and they can pile it up and burn it, or a lot of people, if they don't have irrigation, and they'll disc it under, and then it's not receivable. So
let's see, what other question? It was, I lost it. I'll have to come back to it in just a second. I won't talk the whole time like something. But, I know what it was. We're doing this and reviewing this. It's kind of twofold, but one is to be in compliance with, if we're going to move forward with industrial hemp, this is really just to kind of play nice with the feds, correct?
that's right. When we really looked at having to call law enforcement out to help us take care of a licensee, that's, in most cases, there's no malintent to grow drugs, that it's just a hemp crop that it was too hot or it was too dry or whatever the case may have been. We didn't want to put an unnecessary strain on local communities, so we said, well, why don't we do this under your supervision, so maybe you have to send out a deputy. The idea was really we're the experts on this, and we think we can take this burden off of you.
If we pass this, will this make it a little easier then to grow industrial hemp in Kansas?
I think it will make it won't impact growing hemp, but if you get out of compliance, there should be less red tape in getting rid of a crop that has to be disposed of.
Okay, I'm sure we'll talk about that more. Other questions? Seeing, sorry, Representative Carlin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to enlighten a little bit, we have new members, and I may be wrong, but as I understand it, our research project has ended. So all the rules and regs the farmers had to deal with the first 2 years, well, they're changing or they're gone. Those were research projects, and so it was a really difficult process. And it was very expensive to get started in growing hemp. And the seeds are expensive, and it's still going to be expensive, I think. But it's also very lucrative. My point that I'd like to make, and you verify, please, the rules are changing, and you might be able to just kind of go through that a little bit. And the other thing, since we can now plow it under, is that moving forward, or was that the old? I mean, that from here on, we're going to be able to plow it under with a deputy president or somebody there.
Right. So yes, you're correct. The research program was discontinued. The last licenses expired on January 31st. So as of, I believe, roughly January 18th, we've been accepting new commercial grower applications. There are substantially less burdens on those licenses. We're only regulating growers. So before, if you were transporting hemp on behalf of somebody, you had to have a license. And there were other requirements like that. There are some paperwork requirements if you're moving a hemp crop, so we can trace back where it came from, but there's no license required for distributors, as we called them. The background check requirements have been significantly cut back. Only a primary licensee is required to have a background check. Now, they're responsible for anybody that interacts with their hemp crop, but for example, your children or your farm hands would not have to also be background checked. So we've reduced some of those burdens significantly as well. And I'm sorry, what was the second question?
And while we're on that, the producer, the manufacturing group has different requirements. I think they have to be, do they still have to be background checked?
Yes. So, and that's what's moving to the fire marshals. They'll still have to be background checked because they deal with the extract materials. Okay,
my other question, or just make a point, haven't we decided that plowing there is a really benefit to your soil to grow hemp. And plowing that into the soil actually might be good for the soil. And now, is that true, or is that
I couldn't
a
speak
myth?
to that.
You're an attorney, okay, I'll ask somebody else. All
But
right.
I
yeah.
would say about that process, we wrote our laws, or you guys were kind enough to enact laws that allowed as more or as less stringent methods for dealing with an out-of-compliance crop were put into place. We set up this hemp law in Kansas so that we could adopt those relatively quickly. The new USDA rule is actually, as it's written now, will allow for remediation of crops. So that would involve, you could strip the flowers and use the stalk for fiber, or you may be able to shred it into, they call it biomass, and you can mix parts of the field to try and bring down the THC level. We would still have to test it after that, but there are more alternatives to just destruction. We're working on updating our regs now to make sure they're in place, but from that point of view, there'll be far less restrictions this coming year than there have been in the past.
One last. Is there someone in the fire marshal's office or in the Department of Ag that can help someone then through this process if they have a hot crop? I mean, do you assist a farmer whose crop goes hot and?
We're involved with growers because we have to supervise anything that happens. So we're actually the ones, we go out and do the test before harvest. If there's a retest, we would go out and retest, and because it's technically a controlled substance, then we're involved from start to finish in that process and help develop an adequate plan if it's needed. So.
Thank you very much. I think this is good information to get out into the public, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Representative Newland.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. How many processors do we have? Do we have any processors yet in the state?
We do. Under our research program, so we operated all of last year under our research program. We had 23 licensed processors. Not all of them actually processed. I don't know how many, I believe it's less than 10 actually conducted processing activities. The number in 2019 was 35, so 12 people dropped off, and then a small number actually processed.
That's why I was wondering how many actually were processing now.
Yeah.
But less than 10. That's
We can ask we have our
fine.
specialists.
That's close
if you want.
enough,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kenny, appreciate it. All right, and we'll talk now about probably more of those processors for the next couple. Up next, Doug Jorgensen, State Fire Marshal. Mr. Jorgensen, welcome to committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee, for being allowed to appear before you today. And my testimony is pretty short, but we are supporting the changes to KSA 2-3907 in the industrial hemp program for Kansas. We were approached, it's probably been almost a year ago, by Department of Ag, the KBI, and the AG's office, and asked if we would consider taking over the processor side of this program. We've done some research with other states that currently have the industrial hemp program. We reached out to them to get ideas on what their rules and regulations look like, how they handled the process, and then we put our own rules and regulations together. Going forward, we feel that our prevention division, which is our fire and life safety division, is a good fit for making sure the processing and extraction operations are safe from fire and explosion. And then we feel our investigation division is equipped. They currently inspect and regulate fireworks and explosive industry in the state. So they do a lot of work with paperwork, bills of lading, receipts, different things like that. So we feel they're a good, I guess, group to oversee the actual processing of the hemp, and more importantly, making sure that the byproducts are accounted for and destroyed properly. One of the byproducts in the processing of hemp is pure THC. So, and I think we checked with the KBI when we sort of got into this, and the price of a gram of pure THC on the street's about $300. So there is a market for THC out on the street. So we just want to make sure that it's disposed of properly. And with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Microphone. Any other questions? If you didn't hear that, I kind of speak kind of loud anyway. Those that are even online probably heard me. Special training that members of these teams might have to do is more identification, or probably, you know, what extra effort will have to be made by your office?
We will probably set up some training between our investigators and the KBI lab. There are basically commercial test kits for THC. We'll have to invest in buying some of those, because when we do our inspections and we review the paperwork, because we're going to require that all these loads of hemp that are coming into a processor are, that the paperwork's in place for it. So we know where it came from, to make sure that it was under the 0.3%. And then we will be reviewing their paperwork on how they destroy it, where they destroy it. In our rules and regulations, we are open to making unannounced inspections to make sure that the byproducts are being handled properly at the facility. We're asking them to put video surveillance in the processing centers and give our investigators access, so that anytime we want to, we can check up and again make sure that the byproducts are being handled properly, and then we can always go in and review their paperwork. We're going to require that when the hemp is processed into distillate or to possibly CBD oil, that it be diluted to at least the 0.3% before it can be transported or sold, because anything above that 0.3% would be illegal to transport or possess or sell in Kansas.
So, okay, part of the reason why was because you all do the boiler inspections, right? Correct? That's kind of part. Because the boilers are used in the extraction process. But what I'm kind of hearing you say, the role may be a little bit different for your office, that you'll also have the boiler inspectors come by doing something different maybe than this. Is that, I just want to make sure I fully understand. Will they be visited by several different folks out of your office?
They could be, depending on the facility. If they have a boiler for their facility that does the heat or is part of their process, our boiler inspectors, or depending if what their insurance policy has, because we allow some inspectors with insurance companies to do boiler inspections as part of their policy service. But those boilers will be inspected either by us or by the insurance company. Then our prevention inspectors, which are the fire and life safety inspectors, they inspect all the buildings in the state to make sure they have adequate smoke alarms, fire alarms, sprinkler systems. They'll be inspecting those facilities to make sure they're safe from fire and explosion. Then our investigators will be doing inspections and following up on the disposal of the byproducts.
So I guess my last question this time around then is, you will not need any additional, the people that you have employed in the fire marshal's office can handle these extra duties, as long as we, as long as we don't have a large number of additional processors. Is that maybe the thinking?
Yes, right now, I think there's 10 or 12 processors actually in operation, and we'll be able to handle that with current staff.
Okay, very good. Other questions for Mr. Jorgensen? Saying none, thanks, Doug, and just hang on if we have any more at the end, so thank you.
Thank you.
Up next is Ed Klump with the Kansas Sheriff's Association. Mr. Klump, welcome to committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Ed Klump, and I'm here on behalf of the Kansas Sheriff's Association. Pretty much everything about the bill has been said. I felt it was important, or we felt it was important for us to come before you today, just simply to say that we've been working very closely with the Department of Ag since the inception of the Ag Hemp program, going back to the beginnings of the research program. Our sheriffs work very closely with farmers every day, and we understand some of the challenges they have, and we strive to make things work as best as we can, still complying with the federal regulations that are in place, as was described to you, and also the state laws. We certainly are in support of this bill as written. We accept our role in the disposal process. We weren't out looking for any more work to do, but this is important. It's important for the farmers. It's important for everybody involved, and we're willing to take that on. And we appreciate the work that's gone into this by the Department of Ag to assure that as regulations change and our presence and involvement can be lessened, that'll be automatically implemented in this. But we appreciate the opportunity to participate in that. The rest of the bill having to do with the fire marshal's office, we support that as well. We realize the challenges in some of these operations. Some methods of extraction are more dangerous than others, but primarily we've always been very concerned about the potential to divert some of the high THC content products that are byproducts of that process. And everybody's worked very hard to assure that we keep Kansans safe and we keep that kind of stuff out of the hands of people where it'd be harmful. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll answer questions when it's appropriate.
Very good, thank you. Any questions, Mr. Bott? Representative Carlin?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I get the .3 and the rules. And I know when we go over that, we're in trouble, but when is it dangerous? What level is dangerous? Do we know? I mean.
You know, that's a good question, and I don't know as I have a good firm answer to that. I can tell you in states that have legalized marijuana, we're now seeing THC contents up over 40% in a lot of products. It even gets up into 80, 90% in some of the products involving edibles. The content of THC content in marijuana has been increasing as the agricultural industry does research and learns how to produce more of the product. It inherently also produces more THC. I don't think I can say a particular level. You know, the 0.3% wasn't something we came up with. It's something that was developed federally, and it's something we had to follow. I think the point that we've always had is we understand that you can have a hot crop unintentionally, and we don't want to have to, you know, be hard guys with if it comes out 0.4, and we don't intend to be. But there was never anything developed to say, okay, 0.3 to maybe 5% was, you know, a certain level of out of compliance, and then above that was even more. But we certainly had those discussions that, you know, if somebody's growing a crop and they're hitting 5-10% of THC in it, there's something more wrong than just an accidental thing that probably happened in that kind of an environment. We haven't seen any of that. All of our hemp growers in the state have been very cooperative. They're all doing it for the right reasons. They're trying to do it in the right way, the best they can. And we have not had any problems that I've been made aware of from any of the hemp producers or processors.
Thank you very much. I just never had pursued that question. I thought you'd be the one to ask. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Representative Smith?
Ed, could you help us out with, I've run into it a few times on patrol, and I know that it's happening across the state where finding products that people are buying, even in the state, that say hemp with no greater than 0.3% THC, you test it and it's positive for THC. The law is still 0% THC, even in hemp products. Isn't that correct?
Well, the hemp itself can be 0.3%.
Hemp?
Yes.
From the field?
From the field.
Yes.
Can be 0.3%. When you start putting it into products, then there are other regulations and laws that come into place, and some of those products, you could not have any THC in it at all under our state law. So that does present a challenge, and we have had cases, and it's not the hemp farmers, it's not the producers or the processors, it's other people who fabricate false documents to indicate that this load of green stuff they're hauling around is hemp, and it's really not, it's marijuana. We've had cases where it's not even marijuana, and you dig down underneath it is all the cocaine and the meth. And they're trying to conceal it based on creating this false documentation to make us believe it's legal, so we'll just walk off and leave it alone. And those are some of the challenges, but it has nothing to do with the licensees or the people that are trying to do this properly.
All right, other questions for Mr. Klepp? Seeing none, thank you, appreciate it. Stick around, we may have more, I don't know. Up next, joining us virtually, Sydney Black, Heritage Farms. Mr. Black, welcome to the committee. Oh, he never signed on. Okay. We do have his testimony, though. I believe it's...
Hello. My name is Delaney Tholen, and I'm with Kansas Heritage Farms. And if possible, I would like to, I'm sorry he wasn't able to log in. He's traveling.
Sure, go ahead.
Could I deliver his remarks?
Yes,
or would
absolutely.
You like to read his?
Yeah,
Okay.
state your name, please.
Well, good afternoon, Chairman Rogers, Vice Chair Smith, Ranking Minority Carlin. It's great to see y'all. My name is Delaney Tholen, and I'm on behalf, speaking on behalf of Sydney Black, who's the president of Kansas Heritage Farms. Kansas Heritage Farms, and we are speaking in support and as proponents of HB 2244. Kansas Heritage Farms is a locally owned father-son operation in Douglas County on the farm where Sid and his wife Carolyn have retired. His son Chris and Sid have grown their first industrial hemp crop in this past year and have recently completed the construction of an ethanol extraction hemp processing laboratory. As the industrial hemp research program transitions to a commercial one, we ask that y'all maintain close contact with the Office of the State Fire Marshal to ensure clarity for industry participants and also to consider a couple of specific items related to this bill. Other folks and the team at the KDA and Mr. Titus, as well as others, have been really helpful in the clarity seeking process. But we feel that it could be made more clear both within the Office of the Fire Marshal and the processing, licensing, documentation, as well as within this bill. Section 4D4 relates to fingerprinting requirements, and employees are named but not contractors. And so we want to make sure that we're in compliance and that others entering the industry are able to do so without kind of ambiguity. So if we could provide more clear language there. Then also in section 4H1, it's stated that the fire marshal shall require individuals applying for registration to be fingerprinted, and the fire marshal may require employees or applicant employees to be fingerprinted. So that just leaves room for question. We would like to know if it's the individual as such in the grower program through the KDA, or if it's otherwise. And we want to give credence to the importance of information on the website, and the fire marshal has done a really good job. But it also states that employees should be required to deliver or to submit to fingerprinting. But on the within the regulations, it states that that all applicants and all employees, that anyway, there's a conflict there. So if we could get some clarity there, and also just maintain contact with the agencies. We appreciate you keeping these considerations in mind, and also welcome you guys to come out for a tour or to meet with Sid so that you guys can just have a better idea of what a processing lab looks like. It's an ethanol extraction lab. They've worked with some really great consultants around the country to put together something really great. So your time and consideration is appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Tolan. Any questions? Committee? Seeing none, thank you. Stay on the line. We may have some. Also, Kevin Brown, Sunflower Hemp, has written only, correct? So his testimony is in there as well. Are there any other proponents for House Bill 2244, either here or in the room or online? Seeing or hearing none, opponents? I have none written down, so do we have any opponents of the bill, either in the room or online? Seeing or hearing none, neutral? Any neutral for the bill, either here or online? Hearing none or seeing none, that will conclude. Well, we'll go back one last time for questions. Committee, of what you've heard today. Do you have any questions for those that are here and online? Representative Fairchild.
I think I had, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I had asked this question to Kenneth, or he had talked to me about it. But, you know, the enforcement as far as if farmers, you know, don't go right ahead and destroy their crop when they're told to, when they have a hot crop, you know, currently it's enforced by the county sheriff. But this bill changes it to the fire marshal. Is that correct?
Mr. Titus.
Kenny Titus, Chief Counsel, Kansas Department of Agriculture. And it would not, the changes to the fire marshal don't affect growers. They only affect processors. So unless they're duly licensed growing for their own processing, but it wouldn't change who's regulated. It wouldn't change the growers that are regulated.
Very good, thank you. Any other questions? Representative Minix.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm extremely naive here, but I understand the hemp crop is grown and tested maybe on a weekly basis, and the THC starts to develop a little later, and they want to harvest before it gets above that 0.3% level. Is that correct? And so the growers are trying to watch this. If the crop gets too mature, that's when your THC level goes higher?
Yeah, it tends to increase over time. Currently, the previous USDA rule and our regulations currently say you have to harvest within 15 days of getting your test for THC levels. So once you get your report, you've got 15 days to do that. With the new rule, that'll actually expand to 30 days, so it'll open the window up for people. And if you were to go past that, then you would have to ask for another test and get another harvest window because it increases over time while it's in the field. So we have to keep track of it.
One more question. Is this crop similar to cotton? When they process it, the fine particles and the dryness, is there a fire danger there? You're talking about a different type of process to extract oil from it, it sounds like, so it's entirely different. But in cotton gin, they seem to be susceptible to fires.
You've stumped the attorney, but I have a program expert, if you can answer that, Jeff.
Your name and, yes, answer.
Jeff Vogel, Program Manager, Plant Protection Weed Control with the Kansas Department of Agriculture. To answer your question, when we talk about extractions, we're talking about extracting from the flower or the bud of the plant using either chemical ethanol extraction like the previous conferee talked about, or potentially another extraction method using carbon dioxide and pressure. There may be some other, I'm very much summarizing that, but when we're talking about extraction using a solvent like ethanol, there are some fire dangers associated with that. I think that's under consideration. It's a little bit different than I think what the cotton growers are concerned with the ginning method with the fiber cottonist plant.
Are we growing any of this stuff for fiber?
Very few growers are indicating on their reports that they are growing for fiber. Over 90%, both last year and the year prior, are growing for cannabidiol oil. Very few fiber growers.
is there room for growth in the fiber market for what we're talking about here?
That's difficult for me to say, but I think ultimately with fiber, you have to have a processor who's willing to process in a market for them to sell that product. And if that's not in place, growing fiber is a little less advantageous because of the issues associated with transportation. It'd be kind of like growing in hay and shipping it long distances.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions, we will close the hearing now on House Bill 2244. We will now move on to Senate Bill 27. That is amending the Kansas Storage Tank Act, extending the sunsets of certain funds, increasing certain liability and reimbursement amounts. Again, this testimony was also sent out earlier today. So everybody has it. Okay. So we get started with a description of the bill. Kyle Hamilton once again.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Senate Bill 27 would amend the Kansas Storage Tank Act. The act is meant to help prevent and remediate spills from above ground storage tanks and underground storage tanks that contain petroleum and other certain liquids. Senate Bill 27 concerns relevant funds established in the Kansas Storage Tank Act, the reimbursements that are provided in certain situations, and related sunset provisions contained within the act. Section 1 concerns fees. Under current law, the Secretary of Health and Environment has the authority to establish certain storage tank fees through the adoption of rules and regulations. Fees related to underground storage tanks are deposited in the State General Fund, and fees for above ground storage tanks are deposited in the Storage Tank Fee Fund. Section 1 would amend KSA 6534-105A to require that all fees established under the subsection be deposited in the Storage Tank Fee Fund going forward. Sections 2, 4, and 5 concern the above ground fund and the underground fund. Under current law, monies in the above ground fund and the underground fund can be used to reimburse storage tank owners up to $1 million for environmental releases, less certain costs. The above ground fund and the underground fund are statutorily scheduled to be abolished on July 1, 2024. Sections 2 and 4 amend KSA 6534-118 and 6534-120 and would increase the maximum liability of the above ground fund and the underground fund for a release from $1 million to $2 million. Additionally, Section 5 of the bill amends KSA 6534-123 and would extend the sunset date of those funds from July 1, 2024 to July 1, 2034. Section 7 of the bill concerns the UST Redevelopment Fund and the UST Redevelopment Fund Compensation Advisory Board. Under current law, the UST Redevelopment Fund is used to assist property owners in the removal of abandoned petroleum underground storage tanks. The UST Redevelopment Fund Compensation Advisory Board makes recommendations to the Secretary of Health and Environment regarding disputes over the disbursement of monies from the UST Redevelopment Fund. The UST Redevelopment Fund and the Compensation Advisory Board are statutorily scheduled to be abolished on July 1, 2024. Section 7 amends KSA 6534-134 to extend the sunset date on the UST Redevelopment Fund and the Compensation Advisory Board from July 1, 2024 to July 1, 2032. Sections 3 and 8 concern certain waived costs and replacement reimbursements. Under current law, if an owner replaced a single wall storage tank system with a secondary containment system and then discovered petroleum contamination and reported it to KDHE by June 30th, 2020, such owner could have had the first costs of correction action waived. Similarly, if an owner replaced a single-walled storage tank system with a secondary containment system by June 30, 2020, the owner could have been reimbursed for replacement costs up to $50,000. Sections 3 and 8 of the bill would extend their respective 2020 sunset dates for the waived costs and reimbursements to 2030. Additionally, Section 8 would increase the maximum of any such reimbursement from $50,000 to $100,000, starting retroactively on July 1, 2020. Any applicant who did not receive the maximum reimbursement amount allowable for work completed after July 1, 2020 would be able to submit a written request to KDHE for the remaining reimbursement amount for work completed. Senate Bill 27 would become effective upon publication in the statute book. With that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Committee questions for Kyle? Seeing none, thank you. Also, committee, there is a supplemental note and a fiscal note, and the fiscal note seemingly is just any decrease in revenue would be put back into the storage tank fee funds of the same amount of anything that comes out of SGF. So that's it. And again, this came over from the Senate. So with that, any questions or comments as we move forward? We'll start with our proponents. First up is Tom Pallas from Fuel True. Mr. Pallas, welcome to committee.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Some of you may remember this bill from last year. It was Senate Bill 285, 86, and 87. They were all split up last year to make it somewhat easier to understand, but Kyle did a great job explaining each section of the bill. I am Tom Pallas with Fuel True, and we do support Senate Bill 27. I'm not going to repeat all the things that Kyle went through in the bill, and you can read my testimony, but this bill really does three major things. One, it extends sunsets for the Underground Storage Tank Trust Fund, and that was established in 1989. That fund is basically a pollution insurance program and administered by KDHE. And I must say that it's also probably one of the best programs in the country. We've been very fortunate the way they've managed it. Other states have tried to privatize their programs, and they've gone bankrupt, and they're back into state-run programs. But the trust fund is pretty much the main program, the Underground Storage Tank Trust Fund. It is the one that has corrective action for $1 million today. In the bill, we're asking for that to go to $2 million. The reason for that was established in 1989. What you could pay for $1 back then is not the same thing you could pay in 2021. And I believe KDHE has indicated to us that there's probably 10 different sites that might fall under that program. The second program is called it deals with abandoned tanks. It's the Redevelopment Fund. We have termed abandoned tanks any tank that has been out of service for more than 12 months. By statute, those tanks need to come out of ground. We're told by KDHE there's probably 4,000 or so tanks that need to be removed from the ground. This program is more for, let's just say a bank takes over a fueling site. That fueling site, they want to put in a flower shop or a construction site or something like that, something that doesn't need tanks. So the state would then come in and remove those tanks. If I own a facility that has tanks that are not being used, and I'm the facility owner, that's obviously not an abandoned tank, so therefore I would be responsible to remove those tanks. That cost, it varies anywhere from $3,000 and up, depending on how many tanks you have in each site. Some sites may have 2 tanks, 3 tanks. If it's a truck stop, it could be 8 or 9 tanks. So they have a maximum amount that they would reimburse that facility owner of up to $25,000. The third program, the Redevelopment Fund, is for single-wall to double-wall tanks. Basically, in the 2005 Federal Energy Act was a mandate that all single-wall tanks needed to be upgraded to double-wall tanks. Well, to do that is very expensive for a facility owner. So we went to KDHE and we said, we want to make sure the environment's clean, and we want to make sure that we have these facilities in place. You might remember back to 1998, some of you might remember back when we had the tank upgrades that were required by EPA. And a number of locations went out of business because they couldn't afford to upgrade their tanks. KDHE seeing that says, okay, we will help reimburse a facility owner to upgrade those tanks to the new double wall tanks. And a double wall tank is basically what it sounds like. You got your original encasing, and there's another encasing around it. So if there's a release, it would release inside those two walls. And the reason why we're asking for $100,000, actually I went to KDHE and asked for quite a bit more, is because to upgrade a facility, when you pull the tanks out of the ground, you have dispensers, you have concrete, construction costs, it's anywhere from $300,000 to $400,000 to do a facility. But we do want these tanks upgraded, and we're trying to incentivize these people to do so. You might ask, where does the money come from for these funds? There is a 1 cent environmental fee on every gallon of gas and every gallon of diesel fuel. That money goes into the Underground Storage Tank Trust Fund. That was the one I was telling you about that was established in '89. What happens is it's a very unique fund to where that 1 penny is on until you have $5 million in that fund. Once you have $5 million in a fund and all the other funds are maxed out, that 1 penny would go off. Over the years, there's probably been, the 1 cent fee's been off, I don't know, 8 or 9 times. Don't know that we're going to see that going to the future anytime soon, just because of the types of releases that we've had and what to clean up the sites, the money it's cost to clean up those sites. That 1 cent will probably stay on. The program itself, as I said, KDHE's program is probably one of the best around. We have right at 1,115 sites in the trust fund, and they get about 30 new sites in annually. So there's a need to have this program. And that's why we, as the industry, is working closely with the government, so to speak, to put this program in place and keep it in place. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I could talk a lot on underground tanks. It's not as sexy as hemp and marijuana, but I just wanted to hold your attention there for a little while.
There we go. Any questions for Mr. Pallas? Representative Carlin?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Tom, it seems to me like one of the first bills I had when I came into the legislature was to renew this fee. Was that about '03? Was that about the last time?
We did it in '01. I got to go back and look at the dates. Let's see. 1989.
Well, I remember getting a call from somebody about it. That's why I remember it, because it was one of my first bills. But so we did renew it in that time frame.
We've renewed it twice.
Okay. So how long is this renewal then for?
10 years for the Underground Storage Tank Trust Fund from 24 to 2034. And then we have the other two programs, the tank pull is the 2024 to 2032. And then the upgrade the tanks to retrofit the tanks is 2020 to 2030.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Fairchild.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is it correct to say that this bill doesn't have the net effect of increasing fees overall?
No, because the fee is on at this point, Mr. Chairman, the fee is on at this point in time, so there is no fee increase as we go forward.
It's just a shift, right? Did I read that supplemental or the fiscal note anyway?
Oh, you're talking about
is that right? Is that
money going into the general fund and now it's going to the underground storage tank?
Is that what you're asking, Representative Fairchild?
Okay.
Yeah.
We're putting it into the underground storage tank fee fund because KDHE's put some software in place and some other programs in place. We want to make sure that the money is used to fulfill those provisions that they're putting in place.
So in a sense, they're protected.
That's correct.
Yes.
That's, instead of stealing the money.
Use that phrase.
It did.
We don't.
In 05.
I didn't think we used that word in here. Yeah. Any other questions for Mr. Pallas? Thank you very much. Yes. Up next, we have Sharon Morgan from KDHE, but I believe, are you there?
Yes, sir, I'm here.
Okay, welcome to committee.
Thank you. I'm Sharon Morgan. I'm Section Chief of the Storage Tank Section with the Kansas Department of Health and Environment. Chair Rogers and the committee members, thank you for this opportunity to provide testimony, virtual testimony, on behalf of the Kansas Department of Health and Environment. KDHE provides full support of Senate Bill 27 related to the revisions of the Kansas Storage Tank Act. The KDHE Bureau of Environmental Remediation is responsible for protecting human health and the environment from releases of hazardous substances, petroleum products, and other pollutants. The Bureau manages several remedial programs with the goal of cleaning up contamination to reduce or eliminate the risk to human health and the environment, as well as return impacted properties to productive use. As proposed, Senate Bill 27 amends the Kansas Storage Tank Act as necessary to ensure KDHE can continue to manage the storage tank programs effectively, now and in the upcoming years. In general, there are positive impacts to every proponent of this bill, including having direct access to the UST collected fees, and that will definitely improve our outreach to the regulated community. And we are in full support of this bill. I appreciate the opportunity to share the importance of this bill, and I'm available for questions.
Any questions for Ms. Morgan? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Up next, Randy Stuckey from Kansas Grain and Feed. Welcome to committee.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Thank you. Randy Stuckey, Kansas Grain and Feed Association. As our members have retail fuel assets, they are able to take advantage of these programs, and for that reason, we certainly stand in support of it. Very pithy today.
That's it. Wow. you must see the time on the wall. Questions for Mr. Stuckey? Do you know how many of your members have fuel as part of their offerings?
I don't have a percentage, but it may be fewer today than it was at one time, but still a lot of locations offer retail fuel.
Okay, very good. All right. Seeing no other questions, so thank you, Mr. Stuckey. Appreciate it. And we also have written testimony from Shahira Stafford with the Kansas Corporation Commission. So you can check that out as well. Anyone else a proponent for Senate Bill 27, either here or online? Seeing and hearing none, we'll go to opponents. I have no opponents for Senate Bill 27. Do we have any here or online? Seeing and hearing none, we go to neutral. Anyone neutral on Senate Bill 27, either here or online? Seeing or hearing none, one last chance to committee. Any questions for those who testified? Seeing and hearing none, that closes the hearing on Senate Bill 27. Announcements from anyone? No committee meeting tomorrow. We have changed next week, so we will not meet on Monday. And Tuesday, we will work these two bills. So be sure to bring your computer and for all the backup you need. And then we'll also have Co-op 101 with the Kansas Cooperative Council. That is correct, the right date, correct? Yes. Okay. So with that, travel safe. I don't know if you're going to get an inch of snow or a foot of snow, but it's going to be cold, so get your burning mittens out. With that, we are adjourned. So.